Florida's legislative session is over with a special session yet to come. Several high-profile bills made their way all the way to the governor's desk for an autograph, but many more did not. We're joined by local lawmakers from both chambers and both sides of the aisle, sorting out the impact from the new laws and a record-setting budget on This Week in Jacksonville. So glad you joined us today. Florida's legislative session has spanned 2 months and concluded on schedule April 30th. This morning, we're looking at some of the details of what passed and didn't and why. And we are joined by a member of the House and a member of the Senate. We're joined by a Democrat and a Republican as well, both representing parts of Northeast Florida. So glad they're with us. We welcome Senator Audrey Gibson and Representative Byrd. So, Mr. Byrd, I know Republicans have majorities in both chambers here, 3 of the 4 state cabinet positions. So let's get your view first here, I guess. Were you satisfied with what was accomplished in this 60-day session?
Yes, and good morning, and thank you for having me, Ken. It's great to be here with Senator Gibson. And yes, I think we delivered a lot of wins for Floridians this legislative session, and I'm pleased with what we were able to accomplish. Yeah,
Senator Gibson, I know I've read both. We can get over it, and then some Democrats say, no, it was a failed legislative session. How do you feel about the results of the session?
Well, there are standouts and some things that should stand down. And so we were able to get a good tax package, I think, for the people of the state of Florida. At first, the sales tax holiday, for example, was only 8 days, and I raised my hand and I said, well, why can't we make it 10 like we made the disaster preparedness, because more people can benefit from that. We have a mandatory bodily injury insurance bill that will hopefully reduce some of the insurance rates. So if the governor signs that, then that would be a good thing. On the minus side, which I'm sure we'll get to, the protest bill, I think, was directed at minorities and the protests from Black Lives Matter this past last summer. And then we have an elections bill that is very prohibitive and certainly ultimately impacts particularly people of color.
So, Senator, you're exactly right. Those are definitely on my agenda. Let's swing back to that budget topic, if we could. The budget, $101.5 billion. Largest one that the state has ever had. I know there's some bonuses for first responders, ways to address rising sea level, services for more people with disabilities. But the state didn't do some other things, which was cutting, I believe, Medicaid funding for hospitals and nursing homes. And that seemed kind of likely when we started on this road of the pandemic. How are we going to adjust this? What are the most important takeaways from the budget? And Senator, if you'd start.
Well, and you stole the show at the certainly keeping our hospitals whole and our universities as well. They were particularly concerned about cuts to their funding, which ultimately impacts their ability to do building upgrades and then have more students. So the big bonus is really the American Rescue Act from President Biden obviously helped to increase our budget capacity. We were doing good in the recovery post-COVID, but this is like the icing on the cake. So many infrastructure projects are more the result. And then that meant we had more funding for some other things we needed to do in the community.
Representative Byrd, were you surprised at the ability to have a budget that was over $100 billion for the state, considering what was happening less than a year ago, really?
I was. Where we ended is much different than where we thought we would begin. And I think that's a testament to, in large part, to the governor keeping the state of Florida open, and that because of that, the economy was able to continue to flourish through the pandemic and put us in a better place. And then obviously with the federal government. But to put it in perspective for viewers, so we're now larger than the state of New York. New York's budget is $212 billion, twice as much as Florida. And yet, when you look at where people are moving from and where they're moving to, they're voting with their feet, and they're coming from the Northeast to Florida because we run the state, I think, very well.
Wow. Yeah, so that was a number I did not have in my back pocket there, that number compared to the state of New York. Let's talk about this protest bill and the legislation that came down there. Governor DeSantis made it a priority, and Republicans certainly pushed through legislation. And it was, depending on which side you were listening to, what that bill was about. We've heard it's a new crime of mob intimidation that enhances penalties connected to rioting. but we also heard pushback from the other side. Representative Byrd, were you part of helping craft this? I know 9 months ago, maybe now, the governor had said, this is what I want. I was the prime co-sponsor in the House, and being chairman of the Criminal Justice and Public Safety Subcommittee, it came through my committee first and helped shepherd it through. And, you know, my time on the floor in debate, I spent talking about the constitutionality, and none of those arguments were ever rebutted. There were a lot of allegations made about what the people think the bill does, but it doesn't do those things. It protects the First Amendment right to peaceably assemble, but it does not protect criminal activity. And we wanted to send a message that the things that you see in Seattle and Portland and Minnesota are not going to happen in Florida. Yeah, Senator, what was your view? And I know that we heard a lot of people say that wasn't their impression of what this bill was about.
Not at all. And I call the bill reaction and anticipation. So, and the reason that you hear why the bill was done is based on a press release that I actually referred to in committee and on the floor, came from the governor, who crafted, I guess, initially the language that he wanted to see in response to Black Lives Matter, because it was in a September 2020 press release. Had nothing to do with the insurrection in Washington, D.C., as some had mentioned. And so there are the problematic part of it is that when people assemble peacefully, as is their constitutional right to do so, some of that is impeded in that bill. But ahead of you and behind you, you may not necessarily know what's happening, and you get swept up. It casts such a wide net that you get swept up into being arrested, then you get a record, you can't bail, so it's a tremendous impact.
Yeah, Representative Byrd, I in my research here, I'd read a quote from you about this, and it said, this is attributed to you. For those people who are exercising First Amendment rights and those people who are engaging in criminal activities, we're going to draw a bright line between those two. Right. And what I'm hearing from Senator Gibson is, no, it makes it easier for people who aren't intentionally violent or destructive or whatever to be caught up in this, I think is what you just said. So I fundamentally disagree, and this is why, because what happened under the law as it was before this bill was signed, there were vague terms about what a riot is and is not, or what a public disturbance is. We're actually clarifying and defining those things. And as an attorney, I know that any threshold question is you have to meet the definition. So we've defined what an aggravated riot is. And so unless you meet those definitional thresholds, unless a prosecutor is able to meet that standard, then the rest of the bill doesn't even apply. And that's what I think a lot of the opponents missed is the legal standards, which are sometimes hard to apply to a given set of facts, but I think we've done what we needed to do to protect people's First Amendment rights, but also protect citizens from what we saw around the country over the last year. So we've got 3 topics in so far. and this is the wonderful thing about having both of these elected members of the legislature with us. We're going to have them stay with us, and we're going to keep talking about more of what happened in the state capitol and what it means for you. That's next on This Week in Jacksonville.
Vacation in your own backyard with an above-ground pool for only $39 a month, only at Splash. All above-ground pools up to 40% off. That's right, up to 40% off. And only pay $39 a month. Get your backyard vacation ready and save. Now at Splash.
Getting your air ducts thoroughly cleaned takes the trained professionals at Stanley Steamer using the most powerful equipment to get the most powerful results. Our equipment goes deep inside your ducts, removing years of dirt, pet hair, allergens, even dust mites. Unlike other air duct cleaning companies, Stanley Steamer cleans your entire system. Just look at how much dirt can be removed. Call today for a free inspection and save $50 on a cleaning.
Stanley Steamer gets your home cleaner.
Ah, the tailored comfort of Quilted Northern. When you return home to the comfort of your childhood bedroom, there's nothing else you'd rather see. No offense, Mr. Cuddles. Quilted Northern.
There will come a time when people talk about how Hyundai makes the best car on the road. Now seems about right. The technologically advanced Hyundai Elantra is the 2021 North American Car of the Year.
Now, get 0% APR for 60 months on a 2021 Elantra or up to $3,000 cash back. Visit buyhyundai.com today.
My name is Dr. Samuel Oza. I'm a cardiac electrophysiologist and chief of cardiology at Ascension St. Vincent's here in Jacksonville. I love that connection you have with the patient. It's something I don't think you can get in any other field, and it gets me excited. I feel like we have the kindest, most gracious patients around. That's what gets me up in the morning every day. You're thankful every day that you can do what you do.
Get the cure you need at ascension.org/JacksHeart.
The Bacon Double Stack is back in the biggie bag for just $5. Only at Wendy's.
Vacation in your own backyard with patio sets up to 70% off only at Splash. Dining sets, sitting groups, the entire stock up to 70% off. Plus 0 interest financing available. Get your backyard vacation ready and save now at Splash.
Lead, arsenic, mercury.
Toxic metals inside baby food.
Reduced IQ, higher incidence of ADHD.
Consumer investigator Lauren Verno uncovering how it's a problem that won't be fixed for years to come.
Heavy metals contaminate almost every baby food on our shelves.
Revealing why simply switching to organic won't help. And the affordable foods you may already have at home to replace those risky ingredients.
Toxic baby food, Monday at 7 a.m. on The Morning Show. You're watching This Week in Jacksonville with Kent Justice.
Thank you for staying with us. State Representative Byrd is with us, so is State Senator Audrey Gibson. This is something that I wanted to talk about because I saw this as a bipartisan measure that went forward. There was some legislation, House Bill 7051, that I guess was talking about preventing excessive use of force by police officers. Representative Byrd, tell me a little bit about this. I know this was one of the measures that you kind of carried here.
Sure. So I was the sponsor of the bill in the House, and it is the police practices bill, and addressed a lot of the concerns from many members on both sides of the aisle over police practices and training in Florida. And we want to make sure that there are trusts in our institutions, and none more so than in law enforcement. And so we wanted to put best practices in place to help citizens have trust in law enforcement.
Senator, we just talked about this anti-protest or anti-mob bill a moment ago, and that was clearly partisan. How did we arrive at something here where both chambers, both sides of the aisle work together on this?
Well, actually, prior to a session during committee weeks, the Legislative Black Caucus, who individually and collectively filed reform bills before we started, and had a press conference very much concerned about what we've seen across the country happening to African Americans. And so in the Senate, I think Senator Bracey led the meetings to put the bills together. Some of my language is in here, particularly as it relates to the training and standards, which I also talked to Sheriff Williams about when I crafted the legislation, because I thought that was a place where law enforcement and community could find some common ground. And so it got put together, and it's an awesome bill. Deals with de-escalation methods, if use of force is necessary, compadres making sure that if they see something, they say something that's wrong, as in the case with the George Floyd issue. And so it's standards and training is how we get to where we need to get to, I think.
It sounds like both of you agree on this. Was there some police reform or training reform that needed to happen this time around, considering what our country's gone through, especially in the last year?
Mm-hmm. And I think it's important that we find a common place. And standards and training, we do so much of it in different fields. And so one of the things I mentioned is just because you graduate from the academy doesn't mean that you don't need continuing education, if you will, or training in new ways to deal with a situation that may go awry.
Yeah, Representative Byrd, you happy with how this turned out?
Yeah, I couldn't be more pleased. I think it's a great piece of legislation. It had buy-in from bipartisan buy-in from the legislature, from law enforcement, and from members of the community. So it is an example of elected officials listening and putting together a piece of legislation that I think works for everyone. And in fact, in the House, there were probably more than 24 member bills that had parts of their language that made it to this, more than a dozen different members. So it truly is a piece of legislation that had a lot of cooks in the kitchen.
Well, let's talk about Senate Bill 90. It concerned elections, and it was passed the day before the session ended. It went to the governor for signing. That happened immediately. This was fiercely partisan. Republicans calling it about election security, Democrats terming it voter suppression. Representative Byrd, I'll start with you. Which is it?
Yeah, I think it is an election integrity bill. I've worked in election law since 1998, and so I think the two most critical components, in my opinion, in which I asked to be put in the bill, were the parts about having outside money not coming in to influence elections in Florida. We saw Mark Zuckerberg put in over $300 million around the country to try to influence elections in targeted areas, so we've prevented that. And then the other thing that I think is critically important is under the U.S. Constitution, it is the state legislatures that set election law. That's not in dispute. But what we saw in the last election cycle were lawsuits being filed around the country and then consent agreements being entered into, not by the legislatures, but by other elected officials to bypass not only the courts, but the state legislatures. And so we wanted to prevent that from happening in Florida like we saw in other states.
Yeah. Senator Gibson, what do you think? Was it on that? How does it suppress voters if that's how you feel about it?
Part of it has to do with the vote by mail process. And let me just say that even the governor said that Florida had a model election. It was a model for the country.
Widely praised for how things went in the election.
Absolutely. And so the bill itself is unnecessary. There were no security breaches and there was no fraud. So let's talk about the vote by mail changes. So one, at present, you can request your your vote by mail ballot for general elections one time, and you get to get 2 turns at getting it. Now that has been removed, and so now you have to request one every election cycle. And by the way, the supervisors of elections were not supportive of this bill, except for one of my former colleagues who texted, and I won't say his name. And you can only take your ballot and 2 other immediate family members' ballots. So what happens with our disabled community is impacted. Our African-American seniors are impacted because we generally have extended family, right? And family is voting is a family affair, particularly when we use vote by mail ballots, which, by the way, there was a record set for African Americans using vote by mail ballots.
Is that the component where Democrats or people of color feel like, hey, this is targeted against the African American community?
That and some other language, including the 150 feet, where you can't give literature, if you will, to individuals who are in the line. So there are other...
Is that a change? Wasn't that already established that at a precinct you can't be trying to influence an election like that?
We already had provisions in the law preventing electioneering, and so that did not change.
Well, so let me ask this, and then we'll probably have to get to a commercial, but I know the state of Georgia passed some election reform, immediately not just criticized, but penalized, including, notwithstanding, the Major League Baseball All-Star Game being pulled out of Atlanta. Does Florida, and Representative, I'll direct this to you, does Florida stand to be, to face blowback, I guess, from this?
Well, whether they do that or not, that's not our concern. We're not dictated to by the NCAA. We're not dictated to by Major League Baseball. We're going to do what's best for voters in Florida to protect their vote and each and every individual's vote. And we're not going to be held hostage by outside groups that have a political agenda that they're trying to promote.
Yeah. Senator, just briefly, do you want to see that kind of pressure come to Florida like we saw in Georgia?
We should do the right thing anyway, and we should have done it when that bill was going back and forth between chambers. We shouldn't have to have outside pressure, and the reason we have outside pressure, because so much happened during the Black Lives Matter. More companies and entities are more civically engaged in the fair treatment of individuals. Period, and we should have the same methods, and not suppress the vote, and not deny people's constitutional rights. It's a big thing, and I said in session that many of our there are many athletes. It's their way out to play sports. And if we're not going to have national recognition, our students are going to go elsewhere, and we need to think about that.
All right, so I'm thinking about squeezing in a couple more topics. So let's take a commercial break, and then we'll be back. And one of those topics is that the legislative session ended, but there is a special session on the way, and we'll explain why next on This Week in Jacksonville.
Did you wake up craving a made-from-scratch biscuit topped with tender prime rib and a freshly cracked fried egg? How about now? Buy one prime rib breakfast item, get the second free. Now at Hardee's. Feed your happy.
The future of energy is not just cleaner with more solar or more reliable to stand up to storms and keep your lights on. It's also more affordable for all of us. Looking pretty good to me.
This is a profession where everything is very personal. We specialize in this area of law, and we will not take a case if it's not something that we are very good at and that which we are equipped to handle.
They're here.
You brought all these players in your Buick?
Yeah, it has 3 rows.
So you.
Your Buick has Apple CarPlay. Where do I plug in?
It's wireless.
That's so you. What do I do with these? Careful, it's kind of busy.
Oh, I got this with my superpowers.
And a little help from your Buick.
At the heart of every Buick SUV is you. Current eligible Buick lessees get this low mileage lease on this 2021 Buick Encore GX for around $199 per month.
Amid a storm of challenge and loss, this Florida story gave rise to hope and our spirit to persevere. The Seminole Tribe of Florida and Hard Rock, one a global icon for hospitality and entertainment, the other unconquered resilience, surviving extinction and poverty, only to create tens of thousands of jobs, billions in economic impact, and billions more for vital government services. But quietly, without fanfare, the Seminoles and Hard Rock came through big for others, fighting hunger and disease, natural disasters, all to help and serve others. Today, the Seminoles, Hard Rock, and the people of Florida are prepared to do something even bigger for the future they share in the state they love.
This relationship from the tribe is really going to be beneficial for the state of Florida.
Sponsored by the Seminole Tribe of Florida.
When helping them grow up, be soft. When they grow up too fast,
I got it.
be strong. Life takes softness and strength. That's why Angel Soft is made with both.
We see people who are victims of accidents every day. Retail and grocery stores, office and apartment complexes, they all have to keep their properties safe. If you've had an accident somewhere like this, give us a call. Harold & Harold, don't settle for less than you deserve.
Hunger. It lets you know you're hungry. For 100% charbroiled Angus beef and A1 sauce. It's steakhouse flavor without all the fuss. Try the new Steakhouse Angus Thick Burger at Hardee's. Feed your happy.
The Baxter Family Survival Guide.
You want money, maybe you should do what other people do.
Get my own reality show. Dad, I'm trying.
Weeknights at 8 and 8:30 on Channel. You're watching This Week in Jacksonville on Channel 4.
Florida lawmakers are home after wrapping up the 2021 legislative session, but they are already planning to be back in the Capitol a week from tomorrow. Lawmakers will spend up to a week debating a new gaming compact with the Seminole Tribe. State Representative Byrd, State Senator Audrey Gibson are with us. And Senator, why is this important? I guess there's some procedure here because the governor already agreed to this new gaming compact, right?
He has, but the legislature has to ratify, codify, or it's our duty to decide if it's a good deal for the state of Florida. And we weren't able to reach agreement in last year. And so it's an important component for our budget for our budget coffers. Yeah. But also I like to make sure that there's fairness because with exclusivity, you still have to make sure there's fairness for like the best bets around the state too, so right. that they are in the mix and able to participate. They're looking for that fairness as well. Absolutely.
Yeah. Representative Byrd, I know one of the things that we were just mentioning in the commercial break here, this would, it's expected to generate $2.5 billion new revenue in 5 years, $6 billion through 2030. What are the main concerns you have when we talk about this gaming compact in the special session?
Sure. So number one is whether or not it passes constitutional muster. A few years ago, the Amendment 3 language passed that says that it was a constitutional amendment that doesn't allow for expansion of gaming. Some will argue that there can only be an expansion with another constitutional amendment approved by the voters. So I think that's going to be the primary legal focus that we're going to have is whether or not it meets the contours of Amendment 3.
Yeah, Senator Hudson from our area was quoted on this about saying, hey, I think this still works out, but that's something that you guys will have to kind of hammer out over these couple of weeks. There's a training session that also happens in the meantime. Is that optional for lawmakers, or is it for lawmakers who maybe don't know the details of the gaming and parimutuels and what's going on with the Seminole tribe?
Well, not everybody was on the, I think there was a select committee or a committee on gaming to put together the legislation that we'll be reviewing. And so we do have a number of new members in both chambers, actually. And so understanding the exclusivity part and all the other parameters that have to happen as part of a compact and as part of the legislation so that the payments actually come, but we're doing legislation that keeps us within the letter of the law.
I want to give you 30 seconds each. I got to be really tight on time here. How do you feel about the future of Florida as we go into the rest of 2021? State Representative Byrd.
Sure. Thank you, Ken. It's been great to be with you. And one of the phrases that started going around during session was, let's make America Florida. As I talk to colleagues around the country and other legislative chambers, they are so jealous of what we are doing here and the successes that we've had. And so it matters. The policy matters. Who you put in office matters. And I think Florida is a testament to that. And I think the future of the Sunshine State is very bright.
Good. 30 seconds for you, Senator.
The future is bright when we're inclusive. And we allow locals to elect those representatives that they want, and that has been taken away in the Senate Bill 90 when there is a vacancy. But on a greater note, we have the resources we need, and I see things happening for us in the future on the healthcare front, education, all of that is going to be great.
I appreciate it. State Senator Audrey Gibson, State Representative Byrd, thank you for spending the whole show with us and talking through these issues. And thank you for being with us. City Council member Leanna Cumber is one of the guests planning to join us next week. And we're continuing to look into the proposed local option gas tax increase in Duval County. Thanks for joining us on This Week in Jacksonville. We air each Sunday morning at this time.
See why every day more people are choosing News 4 Jax, Northeast Florida and South Georgia's #1 source for local news.